Half the goddamn city just called 911. I'm Liam, he's Rob, and welcome to Hey Guys Podcast. This week we take a long overdue look back at what is sneakily one of the best action movie sequels of all time. It might have a wobble in the second half and the ending is a bit of a mess, but for an hour and change, John McTiernan's Die Hard with a Vengeance is an all but perfect follow-up to one of the greatest action movies of all time. Is it as good as the original Die Hard? Of course not. But after the fun but overly familiar Die Hard 2, Vengeance managed to increase the scale, change the tone, but perhaps most importantly, retain the spirit of Die Hard, all while delivering one of the most watchable and utterly unique buddy cop duos this side of Lethal Weapon. But Rob, before we move on, can we get this out of the way? Are we officially anointing 1995's Die Hard with a Vengeance as the second best Die Hard movie? Because we all know Die Hard 1 is the best movie. And we spoke about it briefly at the end of the last episode, and we both agreed our Die Hard Vengeance is definitely the second best movie. Now, having watched it, I've had a bit of a wobble, despite what I've said there, because for an hour, this movie is close to being as good as the original. I think the first hour of this film is amazing. The second half was worse than I remembered.
It's interesting you say that, because the first hour, I think Jonathan Hensleigh came out and said it as well. The first hour of this film is pretty much word for word his script for Simon Says.
Yes.
Yes. The second hour becomes Die Hard. Well, it's all Die Hard, but you know what I mean. It's just the second hour isn't part of Simon Says. So it's interesting you said the first hour is a decent film. It'd be interesting to see what Simon Says actually was on its own, the original script. Is this the second best Die Hard film? Yes, it is. Die Hard 2 is great. Don't get me wrong with that. But they just, as I said last week, they basically just took the Die Hard premise and moved it to the left a little bit. You want to be stuck in something bigger. But
that's the big issue. And as we mentioned last week, the problem was it kind of encourages, unflattering comparisons with the first one. In and of itself, it's a perfectly decent film, but it's so similar that you keep comparing it to the first one. And the whole time you're just like, well, I'm just watching a slightly not as good version of Die Hard. So that was the issue with that film.
Yeah. With this one, though, it kind of breathes new life into the character of John McClane, not the premise, because the premise is not the same, is it? It's not like he's stuck in a city, or it's nothing like that. It's just this is his job, but it breathes new life into John McClane, and I think it does really well. Now, what I think actually helps him a lot is Zeus, is Samuel L. Jackson. You said it's a buddy cop thing. They're fantastic together. And gun to my head, if I had a million chances to pick the quote, I didn't think you'd pick the 911 operator. I honestly thought we were going to have some weird, why do you keep calling me Jesus? I look Puerto Rican to you.
Dude, I literally had that, the whole thing. So why'd you keep calling me Jesus? I look Puerto Rican to you? Guy back there called you Jesus. He didn't call me Jesus. He said, hey, Zeus. My name is Zeus. Zeus. Yeah, Zeus as in Father Apollo, Mount Olympus. Don't fuck with me or I'll shove a lightning ball up your ass. Zeus, you got a problem with that? I would have a problem with that. The reason I've got that to hand is because I changed the quote at the last second, because I was like, I'm not sure if everybody wants to hear me do that, but I've done it anyway, thanks to you.
I was going to say, you said you weren't going to do it, so you've done too. But I gave you the opportunity to do that, because I honestly thought that was, as soon as I watched it, I was like, well, that's Liam's quote. And I'm usually 9 times out of 10 correct.
Well, you got it right. I literally right up until this, and I've got two others, because like you said, a big part of why this movie works so well is the buddy cop element of it. So it's like, when he gives him the gun, here, take this, how's it work? You don't have to shoot a gun? All brothers don't shoot guns, you racist motherfucker. He's like, I'll sue me. All that stuff is absolute gold. And that's what kind of makes the second half work. But to bring it back to your earlier point, before we get into this whole buddy cop duo thing, it's really interesting that you mentioned that this was initially a Simon Says script. So like most Die Hard movies, it's a repurposed script. All Die Hard movies,
Number 5, I guess.
Which we won't talk about. This is a repurposed script. So the original premise had McClane on a cruise liner, but was rejected because it was too similar to Under Siege, and ended up being the kind of core script used for Speed 2. Cruise Control. So they dodged a very slow bullet there. But the original Simon Said, and I didn't know this before, was originally written for Brandon Lee. And then after that didn't work out, it was rewritten again as a Lethal Weapon sequence. So this was one of those scripts that was doing the rounds and then ended up as a Die Hard movie. And you can see why, obviously it's one of those kind of spec scripts where they've seen the premise, they've spent a lot of money on it, and then they're looking where to apply it.
Yeah.
And that's why I think the first half of this movie is so good, because the Simon, as you said at the start, it's the Simon Says element of the script. The second half, when they try and turn it into a bigger movie, try and bring it around to, I don't know, something equating to Die Hard, that's when I think it's fundamentally the reason that the second half almost feels somewhat tacked on and a little bit rushed.
Because if you notice between the first and the second hour, I know it's a 2 hour and 10 minute film, but the 10 minutes don't matter. If you notice between the first and the second hours, as it were, the first one, there's some action, but it's not a lot of action. There's not a lot happening to John McClane.
No.
You get to the second hour, poor bastard is getting ripped apart every chance they get. So that's when it becomes your typical Die Hard film, where they've gone, okay, we've already established in the last two films, John McClane is your regular Joe who keeps getting battered. So he keeps getting hurt. He keeps failing. He's not doing much failing at the moment in the first hour of this film. So maybe we need him to fail a bit more. Maybe we need him to start being John McClane as we know him. And that's where I think they change it. I really like the premise of Simon Says. I know it's been used before and it will be used again, the whole bad guy making you jump through hoops. But for some reason, it feels fresh here. Probably because it's throughout the city and it's different things that they have to do. And the whole Fort Knox robbery in between, I think is great.
Yeah, but that's the thing. See, you've made the mistake I've made my entire life. So
it's not Fort Knox, I know that.
Yeah, that's the thing. I thought it was Fort Knox my entire life, to the point where I just assumed Fort Knox was in New York. And
no, it's in
like Kentucky.
Kentucky, yeah. No,
this is the Federal Reserve Bank.
Yeah,
but for some reason, that because but I think my whole life I thought it was Fort Knox, because they mentioned Fort Knox earlier in the film. It feels like a little kind of Easter egg where he says, "I wouldn't swap this for all the money in your Fort Knox." And even when they're in the Federal Reserve, he references Fort Knox. So when I was younger, I've just been like, well, it's just Fort Knox. It's not Fort Knox at all. They're two completely different places.
And that's rightly so. Like, because they do it so much, they mention because everyone knows Fort Knox is the place that has all the gold.
But so it doesn't have the most gold. That's the point.
But it's the most famous one that has the gold. So they've got to give you that link, because you have the guy saying, I want to say German, the German guy who mentions Fort Knox then, because he sees all this gold in cages and he says, wow, Fort Knox. And then you've got Simon who says, I don't know, something along the lines of Fort Knox, eat your heart out, or...
Yeah, well, that was literally, it was only when he said that, I was like, wait a minute, so it isn't Fort Knox? And then there's a scene where it cuts to the outside of the building and it says Federal Reserve, and then they make a point of saying that, all the most gold is actually in the Federal Reserve. And the whole point is just like, it's one of the elements in this film, and there are a few problems with the second half where it feels overly complicated. The whole, by the end, I'm not sure who is double crossing who on Simon's side of the fence. I'm like, I don't really know why they shoot Matthias when they're like, they're trying to convince everyone that the gold is at the bottom of the ocean. I don't know why Matthias had to die, but then everybody else has the gold. I don't really know how they think they're going to get away with it. The ending, which in and of itself is actually an alternative ending, it feels completely tacked on. It's the weakest part of the film, is that final sequence. So after Simon's ostensibly got away and they've escaped the ship, in the original version, basically the idea is that Simon gets away and everybody blames John McClane for it.
Yeah.
So John McClane loses his job, he loses his wife, all goes wrong. But because of the aspirin bottle or whatever the hell it is, he tracks him back to Germany and they have this big showdown. I'm not sure if you've seen the alternative ending for this.
I have, yeah. I think the alternative ending is better, but I think the alternative ending, again, is from the original, and don't quote me on this, but I'm sure that alternative ending is from the Simon Says script.
Yeah, I think it is, because they play a game of McClane Says. It's a little bit overly elaborate with the whole kind of Chinese rocket thing, because I don't think most people would know what that is. And I think they got rid of it because it made John McClane, and I think they're right to a certain extent, it made him look overly vindictive. Like, the whole idea is he's supposed to be just an everyday dude almost, who's good at his job and gets caught up in these situations. Whereas that's like a revenge mission, and it's almost like a bit nasty. And when you see the scene, it almost feels like Bruce Willis from another movie. And I like the showdown between them because you've got two good actors, but I can see where they're like, this isn't going to work. And of course, you don't get, you have the big showdown on the ship, but you don't really have that face to face with Simon. So then they did the stuff on the border going up to Quebec, which they spent a lot of money on, but also doesn't work. So even though I think the original ending is actually better and makes more sense, I can see why they didn't go with it. But then equally, the ending that they did go with feels completely tacked on. So I don't think either of them really worked in the end.
No, I think the ending you need is the ending on the boat. You need them to be a showdown on the boat and 100%. The explosion on the boat and Simon getting caught somehow with all, I guess, the lead, because he's done the double cross. The gold's got away somewhere and Simon gets caught with the lead on the boat.
Basically, it should have never, like, this is like the ultimate New York movie. It should have never got outside New York. That's the whole point.
Absolutely.
It should have ended in New York. And that, like, let's be clear, it should have happened at, like, I don't know, in front of, like, on the water, in front of the Statue of Liberty or something. And I know that probably doesn't work in terms of geography, in terms of where they're going, but who gives a fuck? Just make it work. Like I said, the second half has a wobble. It turns into a bit of an action scene. I actually think this movie is split out into three parts. So you have the Simon Says sequence in the beginning. It's like the first 40 minutes. Then you have the Federal Reserve section, which turns into more of an action movie. And I think it's actually really good. Like, let's be clear. The scene in the lift is one of the few genuinely violent moments in this film. And I think it's like right up there with Captain America's Winter Soldier in terms of best, just fucking action sequences in a lift. Nobody talks about it, but it's totally badass.
Yeah.
Like,
he shouldn't have gone that far, though. He should have noticed straight away that Officer Otto was not a copper. Look at the fucking dude.
Yeah, but
he's
also
not a cop.
You have to, there is a requirement for a suspension of disbelief. Like when they're talking to this guy on the phone who wants John McClane dead specifically, and he has a German accent, and they're like, "Who could this be?" Nobody says, do you think he might be related to that German fucker you threw off the top of a building? I would put that right at the top of the list of things I would have checked. But, nobody brings it up until the FBI or whoever they are show up later in the film.
Do you think as well, the three main villains that you had Simon, you had Sasha, and then you had Misha. Do you think it was pointless for Misha? He was just there to be called Lurch to fight McClane at the end because they weren't going to have Simon.
Mateus. I kept saying him Mateus. Maybe I'm wrong.
Misha.
Oh yeah, my apologies.
Or Misha or Misha, I can't remember. But yeah. So
him, he was Katya.
Katya, I called her Sasha, didn't I?
Yeah, Katya.
Her, Katya. None of us are getting these fucking names right today. Misha, Katya, and Simon. Mm-hmm. I don't think you needed Misha. You needed that character to be incorporated with Simon.
Because basically he was
there to have the fight at the end because they weren't going to give Simon the fight at the end. So he was there to have that big fight, to have the Lurch joke. Because they didn't even show.
Should have had a fight with. They could have had a fight with Katya because like Katya, and it's a really interesting one. She's played by somebody called Sam Phillips, who's actually like a really accomplished American singer-songwriter. I'd never heard of her before. She's only been in 3 movies, but she's like won Grammy. She's won all these awards. Blah blah blah. And she's in this film, and she's totally badass because when she shows up, she's got that Darth Vader vibe, and she, with her face. You don't have to be told that she's a badass. As soon as you see her on the side of the truck, you're like, oh, that bitch is trouble. That bitch is... Yeah. And then she comes in, that over kind of eager dude with the shotgun. She totally smokes him. You're like, oh, she's badass. Have her fight. Fuck it. You don't need both of them at all. I totally agree.
2 things about her. First of all, about 2 things I want to mention, not just about her. The first one, I totally blanked out my mind that she never says a word. She's silent throughout the entire film.
Did she not say a single word?
I
didn't even notice that. She
doesn't say a thing.
That's kind of badass.
Yeah.
That's kind of badass, yeah.
Yeah. And secondly, when she kills as you said, the over-enthusiastic guard, he's guarding the vault on the Federal Reserve. Now, I know realistically people nobody will ever try and rob the Federal Reserve. But just in case, because you've got, what was it, like 130 billion of gold or whatever it was, something stupid like that. Maybe have your shotgun already loaded?
Yeah, it's a strange one. I guess his idea is that you would get alerted long before they got to him at that point, I suppose.
I do.
But you think they might be a little better prepared. But I actually think again, to bring it back to like the first 45, 50 minutes, very much the Simon Says element of this film, I actually thought the plan was pretty badass. Like, as to whether it'll work in reality, I don't know. But when you're watching the film, you're like, fuck, this might actually work. This is pretty cool.
I thought the plan was dope. I really did like the plan, right up until the end, where for some reason they're going to snipe him at Wrigley Field. Like, you've had all these elaborate plans. You've got this fucking weighing scale that's measuring exactly 4 gallons with a bomb in. You've got all of these bombs that are mixing together. You do that suitcase that Charlie finds in Chinatown looks fucking fantastic. And then your end game is to have a guy with a high-powered sniper rifle shoot him in public at Wrigley Field.
Well, yeah, I don't think the initial plan. I think at that point the plan was actually to keep the game going.
It was always going to end up at Wrigley Field because they had the game over sign.
It's not Wrigley Field. It's Yankee. Yankee
sorry,
Stadium.
Yankee Stadium, wherever it is. I'm not a baseball aficionado. I do apologize, but it was always going to be because they had that mini baseball game with the sign "Game Over" underneath it. It was always going to end there for him.
Yeah, it is strange that they but again, I think it's that whole idea they weren't sure quite how to incorporate the Simon Says element of the plot in with the second half of the film when it starts kind of losing its drag. And even like my big issue with that sequence is that they split up. You have the one, like for the most part, and we'll get to, the start of the film. This film mostly looks amazing. Like, this is a great advert for on location shooting. And we've mentioned it a bunch of times in New York movies. Like, you compare like Ghostbusters, the original film in 1984 versus Ghostbusters. What was the most recent one? Afterlife, whatever it was.
Frozen Empire.
Frozen Empire. Yeah. And that's set in New York, but you can see it's CG, it's on a set, and it just looks like ass. And then you go back and watch Ghostbusters 1984, it's all on location, it looks great. This has got the same thing. You're like, they're shooting in New York. There's a reason this film looks better than most modern movies. It's because they didn't have the CG, so they're like, fuck, we've just got to shoot in New York. One of the few bits that looks dodgy is the bit in the tunnel. And it's the closest we get to a Die Hard 4 John McClane versus a fighter jet moment, is when he's on top of the truck. The water's behind. That looks bad, but to make matters worse, when he shoots out of the tunnel because of the water pressure, and just by chance, Zeus is fucking driving past. Give me a motherfucking break.
Do you know what that gave us, though? That gave us one of the best characters in cinematic history. Jerry.
Oh, Jerry.
Jerry.
Jerry is pretty good in fairness. I did quite like Jerry, and he's got
from the thing
the whole setup so you would know the answer because he's just like handing out quotes.
Yeah, I mean that's stupid. When he's talking about, I enjoyed it when he's talking about the aqueduct and stuff, and he's saying like 13 million tons of concrete or wherever it is. But I loved his introduction. You in a truck? Give me your hands. So he puts his hands out the window. He was like, "You a truck driver? I'm a fucking in a truck. Of course, I'm a truck driver."
Jerry
was great.
Well, that's one of the few things like this film maybe lacks in comparison, certainly to the first film. And you mentioned it in terms of, well, no, I think this film has comedy, but it all comes between Zeus and John McClane. I actually think their back and forth are quite charming. It's not laugh out loud funny, but I think it's funny enough. But what it doesn't have is that great supporting cast. Now, I actually think Inspector Walter Cobb, played by Larry Brigman, I think he's actually pretty good, and Graham Greene as Joe is fine, but he doesn't get much to do. But even beyond the fact that, and we've mentioned there, like you have Katya, who's cool, but she doesn't have as much to do as she should. And then the whole, what's his name? I'm calling him Matthias. I've written his name down wrong, obviously, so I'm going to stop calling him that.
Misha.
Nick Wyman. That all doesn't really work. They certainly don't compare to like Hans Gruber and what was the name of?
Oh, sorry, I'm getting this wrong as well. He was played by Nick Wyman, was he?
Yeah, Nick Wyman. Yeah.
Okay, then I've got the wrong character, but his name, Nick Wyman, apparently played a character called Targo.
Yeah, but I think it's Matthias Targo.
I don't know. I just got him as Targo, so you're probably right. But the other thing is Larry Brigman. You just said. Did you say Walter Cobb? I heard Walter as well.
Yeah, it's Inspector.
He's credited as Arthur Cobb.
Well, it's definitely Inspector Walter Cobb. 100%.
Yeah, that's right, though. But he's credited, and that's what's confused me. Right, so Targo. We'll just stick with Targo. I don't know what the fuck Misha is. Then.
Well, anyway, this is probably well, no, we will have to mention him later on because of a strange cut towards the end of this film because of some of the editing that they had to do because they actually cut this movie after the cinematic release. Well, we'll deal with it now. The scene where the reason that Targo is in this film is basically to have the big fight with John McClane at the end of the film. And if you watch it now on Disney Plus, which is a mostly uncut version, you see him, they have the fight, he gets tripped over by the chain, and then all of a sudden, the fight just ends, and Targo's dead. And I remember watching this like way back in the day, the cinematic version, he whips him loads, like he gets his ass whipped by Tiger and ends up choking him out or whatever nonsense. All that stuff is just gone now. And there is no cut you can find anywhere where that still exists, which is one of those just bizarre things where, they cut the film so many times that I assume they just haven't got that original print anymore. So that version of the fight is just disappeared. So you end up with this really underwhelming action sequence, which is all building up because he's this big, huge guy. They fight for a couple of minutes. He calls him some silly names, and then the scene just ends. And they're like, wait, what the fuck just happened? But that is not what people saw in the cinema in 1995. But hey, like I said, there are problems with the second half of this film. What there are problems with... Oh, sorry.
Sorry. We also had the Demolition Man Pizza Hut Taco Bell thing in here, didn't we?
Oh yeah, of course.
When Charlie's defusing the bomb and then it spits the liquid at him, we get pancake syrup. But I think the Americans get corn syrup, I want to say.
Corn syrup is what the Americans would get, yeah. So you have a few things like that.
And also the sign at the beginning, we'll get to that as well then before you move on. The change. Because the TV the theatrical release and the release of the billboard, he actually didn't have anything on that billboard when he was filming because as you said, he's filmed on location. They put it in post-production about what it said on the thing, I hate the N-word. But we didn't get, we had that when we watched the Disney Plus version, but when it's released to terrestrial TV, it actually says, I hate everyone.
Oh, yeah, which is ridiculous. Although, I tell you what, that sequence... And I forgot how quickly that comes at the start of the film. Like, this movie hits the ground running. So straight away, you get
a fantastic song.
Great. Oh, yeah. I love the song. I even love the credits where it comes in with the music. Bum, bum. And you get Die Hard, then with a Vengeance. And then, Summer in the City. I'm like, all right, this is fucking awesome. And then you get that unbelievable explosion in the middle of New York. To the point where I was looking, I was like, how the fuck did they do that in the middle of New York in 1995? It just looks like somebody... It's the same with the subway explosion later in the film. I'm sure some of that was done on a set, but it just looks absolutely phenomenal. Because why? Because they're actually blowing shit up. That's the same.
It was the same with the pickup truck on the bridge. The boat actually pulled the pickup truck off the bridge.
Yeah. And that's why it looks so good. But then any moment when, that leads into them being pulled off the side of the crane and it looks a little bit dodgy. So there are a few moments where the visuals don't match up. But most of the on location stuff looks absolutely amazing. As I said, the only thing which really compares to it is something like the opening of Children of Men. But it was at that time when I started writing down, like, this might be one of the best action sequels of all time. Like, I'm not sure if I'm being hyperbolic now because I don't think the second half matches up. But is this it's not T2 or Aliens if we're putting those at the very top of like greatest action movie sequels. But does this belong alongside the likes of like Fury Road, Lethal Weapon 2, Mission Impossible Fallout? Is it in that category in terms of best sequels to action movies?
Yeah, it's quite interesting though, isn't it? Because you mentioned T2 and Aliens then, which are completely different animals to the original films anyway. Completely different animals. Like, and I appreciate the premise is different between Die Hard and Die Hard 3. But they're not even in the same, like, okay, Terminator 1 and 2 can be classed as action films, but I would argue Terminator 1 was probably more of a thriller. Terminator 2...
Terminator 1 was a horror movie, I think.
Well, there you go.
They call it like a techno-noir, but the second movie is an action movie. It's a sci-fi action movie.
And that's the same with Alien. Alien was your standalone horror film. Aliens is an action film. But so I don't know if I would put them as the greatest action sequels because they're not. I do agree with you that this is probably one of the greatest action films. I agree. Lethal Weapon 2, I probably prefer over Lethal Weapon 1. Absolutely. I do. I know
a lot of people do. Yeah. A lot of people do. I've always
that may unfortunately be the fact because they introduced Joe Pesci. Beverly Hills Cop 2 better than Beverly Hills Cop 1 in my opinion.
The thing is, right, I'm not going to argue with you because I think it's kind of like, it depends on who you ask. I probably just about prefer Beverly Hills Cop 1 and Lethal Weapon 1, but on any given day, I could have my mind changed on both of those. Yeah. Like, they are close. The thing is, this has the issue in so much that it clearly isn't as good as the first one. But the first one's so good. Like, when you're talking about Die Hard 1, you're talking one of the top, 3 action movies of all time? Like, some people, you could make a very strong argument for Die Hard being the greatest action movie of all time.
In my opinion, it is. It's one of my favorite films.
Completely reasonable.
It is top of the draw.
It's up there because, like you said, and I've got that down in my notes. T2 and Aliens are like perfect sequels in many respects, but are they action movies? Like they are to a certain extent, but I wouldn't put them in the same genre as, say, like you say, Die Hard, Lethal
Yeah,
Weapon, stuff like
but
that. Almost feels like its own
T2
subgenre.
and T2 and Aliens are action films, but what they follow on are not action films.
Yeah, they
Yeah,
they're like very unique beasts in many respects. But yeah, I think people don't talk about Die Hard with a Vengeance about being this great sequel because there is a massive drop off. Not massive, but there's a pretty big drop off from the first one. But that's not us criticizing Die Hard with a Vengeance. That's us saying, listen, Die Hard might be a perfect movie. Like Die Hard isn't that rare. When you talk about perfect movies, and I'm not talking about like necessarily Oscar winners, I'm talking about perfectly formed movies. And I've made the argument before in terms of like for Predator, for instance, in terms of achieving what you went out to do, like, hitting all your goals. Predator is the perfect version of that movie. Die Hard is the perfect version of that movie. Back to the Future is arguably close to being a perfect film. There are actually very few where you're like, I wouldn't change a fucking thing. Die Hard's one.
That's the thing, isn't it? When you do sequels and stuff, you want to develop the character more. But I don't know if you can develop the character of John McClane any more than you already got in Die Hard 1. He was just
Raking over the coals is the problem. Even in
yeah,
this one, what is he doing? He's phoning Holly again. He's fixing his marriage again. It's like, yeah, we fucking get it, dude.
Well, they decided to give him a foil, so he hasn't got Holly anymore. But now was it one step away or two steps away from being a full blown alcoholic and things like that. And it's like, why are you turning him into this? Just make him
the
your
good
copper.
thing is the reason I think it works in this film is because I think they know it's old hat by the time you get around to this film. So they're like, all right, we need basically they just uses very loose links to the other Die Hard films. Like, oh, Holly's being mentioned. Oh, he has problems with drink. It's a Die Hard film. But really, what they wanted to do with this film is like, we want to get Samuel L. Jackson and Bruce Willis on screen together as soon as possible. And fuck me, they do. Because to bring it back to the scene with the sign, whether it says "I hate N-word" or "I hate everyone," which is fucking stupid. One, it's a great way to kind of bring them together immediately and build up that kind of love-hate relationship they have. But two, it really separates Bruce Willis from the likes of Schwarzenegger and Stallone. Now, they always got bundled together, and obviously you can find pictures of them doing Planet Hollywood together where they're all holding hands and all that bullshit. But I think it's like a timing thing, in the same way, and this is a weird analogy, but remember at the turn of the century, like Incubus were thrown in as a new metal band. It was just because of timing, and they went on tour with Korn, but really they were their own thing, but got bundled in. I feel like it's the same thing with Bruce Willis. Yeah, he's an action hero. He was releasing action movies around the same time Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger was, but he's a completely different beast. And the opening sequence is a perfect example of that. There is no way Stallone or Schwarzenegger in 95 would have the opening of the film with them being hungover, looking like shit, having a sign which says, "I hate the N-word." There is just no fucking way they would do that.
Even if they did that, they would then have had to have incapacitate the whole gang themselves. There's no way they're just escaping from there.
Almost by luck, yeah.
Yeah. It would all have seen that they disarmed the whole gang and they've got them on the floor themselves. And they're like, oh, I'm the police and blah, blah, blah. So yeah, I totally agree with you. Totally different beasts in regards to that. And what a great introduction of Samuel L. Jackson.
Yeah,
Samuel L. Jackson. Sorry, I just want to say, we've said before about like, would this film be better with this character, with this actor or this act? Because they always say like, God, this person, for argument's sake, Sean Connery was originally asked to be, or was the original choice for Simon. But he said, I don't want to be this ultra-violent villain, so he didn't do it. So the original choice and the guy who nearly did it was Lawrence Fishburne.
Yeah.
But he turned it down. And then when he realized, okay, that might have been a mistake, and he went back to do it, because obviously then he went to do Fled, I think it was, around about the same time. Yeah. So when he decided to do this again, Samuel L. Jackson was already cast. I can't see anybody better than Samuel L. Jackson doing this. Like Samuel L. Jackson...
Yeah, Lawrence Fishburne, to shoot his fucking agent out of a cannon, because they also turned down Pulp Fiction because the idea was like, oh, you should only be taking leading roles at this point in your career.
Yeah.
So he turned Die Hard with a Vengeance and Pulp Fiction down. I'm like, oh my God. Which brings us around to the fact that this is like a proper comeback like sequence for Jesus Christ, Bruce Willis. Because a couple of weeks ago we did Hudson Hawk. And we have different feelings on that. I'll tell you straight up, it is one of the worst films I've ever seen. And he was in a...
And I'll tell you the truth, it's fantastic.
it's really bad. But whatever way you think about it personally, the fact is that was a massive commercial and critical flop. Massive.
Yeah.
He was on a run of pretty bad form up until a bit of a comeback with 1994 and Pulp Fiction, which is referenced twice in this film, which I didn't realize. He references Captain Kangaroo.
Yeah.
And there's a bit where the dude's disarming the bomb. It's a fake bomb, but he references Pulp Fiction as well. But from like 94 through 2000, it's almost like the second golden age for Bruce Willis. So he does Pulp Fiction, he does Last Man Standing, he does this, 12 Monkeys, Fifth Element, Armageddon, The Siege, and Unbreakable. Oh, and The Whole Nine Yards, which people forget was a fucking monster hit in like 2000.
Yeah.
He also did, and I basically brought this up because I wanted to get your opinion on these two films, because I think you'll probably agree. I assume you love Last Man Standing.
I fucking love Last Man Standing.
I knew you'd love Last Man Standing. I'm a big fan of that film as well. It might end up on the podcast at some point. But the two question marks during that quote unquote second golden era for Bruce Willis are The Jackal and Mercury Rising. Now, I'm going to go on the record saying Mercury Rising is actually pretty bad. I quite like The Jackal. I always remember the sequence with the sniper rifle with, is it Jack Black? And
Jack
he like,
Black,
shoots his arm off.
yeah.
Dude, that seems fucking badass.
See, not just to be devil's advocate or to be a dick. I quite like Mercury Rising. I didn't mind it.
Fine.
I mean, Mercury Rising kind of felt like, because they're always released around about the same time, films like this, aren't they? Mercury Rising and the one with fucking Gene Hackman and Will Smith.
Oh, that was a little bit later. I know the one.
No, that was Enemy of the State. Enemy of the State.
Enemy of the State was like 2000, I think.
No. That was 98, 99 as well. And I'm gonna double check.
You might be right. Yeah. I thought that would be like 3-4 years later than this, because I think
Enemy of the State is it?
Because Mercury Rising was like 96, right?
No, Mercury Rising. Oh, we just had that. Then was it Mercury Rising?
Sorry,
that's right. No.
We've gone down the rabbit hole now.
Yeah, and I'm gone down the IMDb hole. Yeah, Mercury Rising 1998. Enemy of the State 1998. Fuck you.
Same year. Jesus, yeah. In my head, I would have had Mercury Rising like 96 and Enemy of the State like 2000.
But they were both the kind of like the same thing, where you had the government agent tracking.
Oh yeah. There was crossover. I just totally think of Enemy of the State in particular as being a much more modern film. I am legitimately shocked, because I'm usually pretty good with the years with the movies.
Yeah,
I've completely shit the bed on that one. I am legit amazed by that. But Mercury Rising did have one of the most unlikely kind of like video game tie-ins. Like Mercury Rising had a video game for the PlayStation 1, which was a complete piece of shit. But it's just, totally did.
So going back, you've said a lot of films that Bruce Willis did then. I've got his IMDb up, so we're going to play the game. Of all of the Bruce Willis films, give me his known fors. Yeah. 4 films.
Die Hard.
4 things. Die Hard, yeah.
Fifth Element?
No.
Oh, I thought maybe that'd sneak on there. It's not gonna be like The Sixth Sense or something like that, is it?
Sixth Sense?
Die Hard, Sixth Sense.
You did already mention another one he's known for. You've already mentioned, well, you've mentioned a few, but you mentioned it
Armageddon would be on there, surely.
No.
What the fuck? Armageddon's not. That movie was like one of the biggest hits ever.
Not on his known for.
Unbreakable?
No.
Fuck's sake. 12 Monkeys?
No. Go earlier, very earlier.
Pulp Fiction?
Pulp Fiction.
So if we got 3 eventually?
You got 3. You're not going to get the 4th unless you think outside the box.
Don't think it's going fucking north or something.
No. You need to think outside the box.
Oh, is it going to be something where he makes an appearance in it rather than like he's the star?
No, I mean, as soon as I tell you this, I'll tell you anything.
All right, go for it.
TV.
Oh, Moonstruck.
Moonlighting.
Moonstruck. Yeah. Moonstruck was a movie with Cher, wasn't it? Jesus Christ,
Moonstruck was Cher. Yeah. Moonlighting. So he's now Die Hard, Pulp Fiction, Moonlighting, The Sixth Sense. Of his entire catalogue.
I'm amazed Moonlighting.
Exactly.
Jesus
I'm
Christ.
amazed that, like, all right, I'm not a huge fan of Sixth Sense, so I wouldn't put that over, like, Armageddon.
I wonder if the whole what they're known for is based on searches, if there's like an algorithm. And I suspect, like with Bruce Willis, a lot of people, certainly when I was younger, I remember a lot of people when they found out, he was before he was, John McClane and on Die Hard, that he was on Moonlighting, and it was like, what the fuck is Moonlighting? Because outside of America, it wasn't a massive hit. It was certainly a big hit over there. So maybe a lot of people would search for Moonlighting just to see what the fuck it is. That's the only reason I can think. But I don't know how they come to the kind of, these are the 4 things they're known for. Because Moonlighting ahead of Armageddon, are you fucking insane?
Did you know as well? He was on that '70s show for an episode.
He was on that '70s show. I
Yes.
remember him being on Friends. He had like a proper run on Friends as well.
Yeah, he was knobbing
Rachel's boyfriend
Rachel,
for a
wasn't he,
while.
for a
Yeah,
bit?
yeah,
Yeah.
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 But no, I didn't know he was on that '70s show. And I'm pretty sure I watched the entirety of that '70s show.
Yeah, but he
Oh, bizarre.
played a character
Bizarre.
called Vic. Anyway, let's get
But
back to
bring it back to the movie. Like you mentioned the start there, where obviously you have the introduction between Zeus and John McClane. What it also does is immediately introduces the race politics for this film. And one of the things I love is that it never over explains itself. It's like, yeah, he doesn't like white people, or he's certainly wary of them. And John McClane doesn't feel the need to constantly say, hey, I'm not racist. He's just like, well, I work in Harlem. He obviously has like a dodgy relationship with cops. You know, he mentions it. It's like, oh, if I tell you that there's, you know, a cop dies in Harlem, there's going to be 100 cops with itchy trigger fingers and all that jazz. But the movie never like over explains it. You know, if they made this film in 2024, they would have a flashback where fucking Zeus's father was killed by a cop or something.
yeah.
And then you would have like John McClane needlessly constantly, oh, but got all these black friends or something. It would turn into a thing. Whereas this is a movie which just lets you figure it out. It's like, yeah, we get why he might not like him, you know, but at the end of the day, I think the whole message of the story is it's like, yeah, you have differences, but you spend a bit of time together. You're like, oh, you guys are kind of cool. And you know right from the start when Zeus is on the phone to Simon and he says, you know, stick the thing up his ass or whatever, and you get that smirk from John McClane. And you're just like, oh, these guys are going to get on like just fine. It's going to be great.
It's weird because they are definitely solar opposites, but at the same time, not so much. Like,
so, there's similarities for sure.
Yeah, I really like it. Going back to the introduction of Zeus.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be a hard push unless you looked at the credits. Did you recognize the kids?
No, I did not.
Brothers, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Aldous and Edwin Hodge. Aldous Hodge.
I don't. Who's that?
So you'll know his face. He's been in loads of things.
Mm-hmm,
but
mm-hmm.
Did you watch Black Adam?
Oh, I know exactly. He was
Hawkman, yeah.
Yeah, I watched 10 minutes of that film before I was like, Jesus Christ, that film is bad.
You've done better than I couldn't even make it past the credits.
So bad.
I couldn't believe it was Aldous Hodge. Now, I love Aldous Hodge from that TV show Leverage, but he's been in loads of things. Like he's going to be the new Alex Cross in the Amazon Prime Jack Ryan reboot thing that they're doing. So
the reason it's probably surprising is because Samuel L. Jackson, we've already mentioned the fact that this film for the most part is aged wonderfully, other than the fact, and let's be clear, like, you know, mobile phones ruined this film. Like, but for the most part, it's just like, well, this film just still looks great. And there isn't a huge amount to give away the fact that this is from 1995. And certainly when you take into consideration that Samuel L. Jackson is one of the three maybe ultimate ageless actors. Like, this is 1995. He largely looks the fucking same. It was like when they de-aged him. But and everyone's like, God, the de-aging technology for Captain Marvel is amazing. It's because you don't have to do shit because he looks the fucking same as he did in 1995. He is up there with Leslie Nielsen and Steve Martin, who are guys. And I think the reason they've aged so well is because they always looked 50. Like, you know, going right back to when he robs McDowell's in fucking Coming to America. You're like, that dude's 50 years old. He was like 26 then. He's been 50, and now he's like 70. He still looks 50. He's unbelievable. There's just something.
Sorry, you look at like him and like Paul Rudd and Keanu Reeves as well. People that seem to have made deals with the devil. Like they just can't seem to age. Like John McClane.
They're different beasts though, because they've always looked young. Whereas those guys, Leslie Nielsen, as I said, Steve Martin and Samuel L. Jackson, they always looked old. They just always looked old.
I would put Morgan Freeman in that as well. Morgan Freeman has always looked like, from Driving Miss Daisy onwards, he's always looked like Red from Shawshank.
Yeah, and that was like, you see a picture, I saw it, funny enough, I saw a picture of them today, and it was like 1994, Shawshank Redemption. It was, you know, Andy Dufresne and Red, and then they had them on the red carpet for some kind of get-together, and you're like, you see Tim Robinson, and suddenly it's like, oh, well, he looks like a much older dude, white hair and stuff, and you're just like, it's just fucking Morgan Freeman. Just looks the same. It's absolutely insane. Absolutely insane. But yeah, like, I think this movie is ultimately at its best when those two are on screen together doing the Simon Says shit. And when I remembered this film before I rewatched it, and I knew what happened in the second half, but my memories of this film are all geared around the first 45 minutes. I think about the chase through Central Park in the cab, still looks amazing.
Are you aiming for these people?
Oh yeah, all that stuff is absolutely gold. I think of the subway explosion, that bit, that whole sequence is absolutely fantastic. And one
Yeah.
of the bits, sadly, I always think of because to this day I still don't know how it works. The fucking jug thing, I just don't get it. You know, when he's got like
Serious.
5 liters and he's putting it like there's one point where he's got 2 liters in one jug, and then he just says there's 4 liters in there, and he's like, well, just pour one into this. I'm like, but how do you know it's accurate? I never quite got my head around the jug thing.
Would you
And
like
that's
me to
always
help you?
upset me. Yeah,
Would you
go
like me to
for it.
help you? Yeah. There are two solutions to the water jug riddle in the park. To place exactly 4 gallons of water on the scales when you only have two jugs, which hold 3 and 5 gallons respectively, you must do either of the following. Right, ready?
Okay, go for it.
Number one, fill the 5 gallon jug and decant the water into the 3 gallon jug. This leaves 2 gallons in the big jug. Number two,
And three
empty
in
the
the other,
three
yeah.
gallon jug and pour in the 2 gallons from the 5 gallon jug, leaving space for 1 gallon in the small jug. Number three, refill the 5 gallon jug and pour water from it into the 3 gallon jug until the small jug's full. Number four, that leaves exactly 4 gallons in the big jug. Put it on the scale and the bomb is disarmed. The second method is number one, fill the 3 gallon jug and pour the water into the 5 gallon jug. Number two, refill the 3 gallon jug and pour into the 5 gallon jug until the big jug is full, leaving 1 gallon in the small jug. Number three, empty the big jug and transfer the 1 gallon from the small jug to the big jug. Number four, refill the small jug and pour all 3 gallons into the 5 gallon jug, resulting in 4 gallons in the big jug.
Still not sure I get it. Still not sure I get it. I think I'm
I
just
mean,
gonna have to get
I
over
said
it.
a lot of numbers then as well. I probably went by
You said a
bit
lot of
too
numbers.
fast. So yeah,
You said number one and number two, but then you went 1, 2, 3, 4. So yeah, I would have to see images. Somebody would have to take me through it. And needless to say, they don't do a good enough job in the movie because maybe I'm not paying attention. But I remember every time I've watched it, they get to this point where they're like, "Oh yeah, you do this. Great job, McClane." I'm like, I have no idea how the fuck you did that.
I do love that because obviously, as I've just said, there is a solution. That's the whole point. It's a riddle. There is a solution to it.
Yeah.
But
I believe that there is a solution.
But
it's just I'm not figuring it out with them.
Well, that's what I'm saying. When they were writing this, they were like, well, this is going to pickle people's minds. So what we'll do is we'll just cut away to something else. When we cut away back, they've got 3 gallons in here, 2 gallons in here. All of a sudden, 4 gallons. Fine.
Yeah. Well, I'm just gonna have to get on with it. But other than that, like as I said, this movie is one of like the top tier buddy cop duos, like with Zeus and McClane. Is it up there with Murtaugh and Riggs? I would again put it on that second tier. When I think of like, I know it's a comedy movie. I actually think Farrell and Wahlberg are amazing, and the other guys, the nice guys with Gosling and Crowe, Bad Boys, Smith and Lawrence, Hot Fuzz, even with Pegg and Frost. I would put him more in that category. And the only reason maybe it doesn't get talked about is because they just don't have another movie together. I would have liked to have seen Die Hard 4 with those two coming back, maybe.
Do you mean McClane and Zeus?
McClane and Zeus, yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Because Samuel Jackson's done about 4 or 5 with Bruce, hasn't he? So
they've done plenty of movies together.
Yeah.
Obviously, they did. How many did they do together? He did 3 Unbreakable movies, for heaven's sake.
Yeah, and then Pulp Fiction. So
Pulp
probably
Fiction.
5.
So they've done 5, and let's be clear, Samuel Jackson is sneakily in most films you've ever watched. So they've probably done 2 or 3 others where they're at least in the same movie. I wouldn't be surprised. But yeah, and the thing is, I when I was thinking about this film, I really had no concept of just how big a hit it was. I knew it did fine, but when I look back, this was the highest grossing movie of 1994.
Yes,
this
yeah.
beat Toy Story, Apollo 13, GoldenEye, Batman Forever, and Pocahontas. The other thing that surprised me was Waterworld was 9th on the list. I know it was considered a flop because it cost so much. It still made 264 million worldwide in 1995, which in 1995, I mean, to put into context, like Die Hard with a Vengeance only made like 366. I think it beat out Toy Story by like 3 million. So it only made like 100 million more than Waterworld. But Waterworld was this massive flop because it cost that much. But yeah, Die Hard with a Vengeance was an absolute monster of a hit back in 1995. And I had no idea. I had no idea. I thought it was a solid hit. I would have never guessed in a million years that it was the biggest hit in 1995.
That's bringing everybody to it, though, isn't it? You've already enjoyed 2 films with John McClane. You've opened up the story to New York and things like
It
that.
does speak to it being a different time, though. Like nowadays, there is no way an R-rated action movie is beating, say, Toy Story fucking 6 at the box office. There's just no fucking way in a minute. Like you've seen the cinema at the moment, all these films are struggling. Then Inside comes out and just strolls past $1 billion. It's just, if Toy Story 5, when Toy Story 5 comes out, it's going to make over $1 billion. Like they all fucking do. There's no way you're making an action movie nowadays, like a standard action movie sequel, that's going to make fucking a bit. Just no chance. There's no way it's going to be the highest grossing film, especially again if it's R-rated. Just forget about it. It's strange. It just goes to show how much the cinematic landscape has changed, admittedly, in like 29 years, which I don't like to admit, but it is what it is.
There is a Toy Story 5 coming out, isn't it? You said.
Yeah. Oh yeah. 100%.
Yeah, 2026.
Yeah, they're doing all that, and especially after Inside Out 2 made even more money than they're expecting.
Yeah.
Like they'll be doubling down because they've had a couple of not flops but letdowns at Pixar. So yeah, who would have thought we'd never talk about Pixar movies during a Die Hard with a Vengeance podcast? But to bring it back to the movie, what I do love is the fact that Die Hard has probably got a number of tropes you could pick out, but the one that always stands out to me is that 30 minutes into this film, John McClane looks like he's been run over by a truck. I just love that. Like no other action movie does that to the extent that they do in Die Hard movies. Like he wears every bump and bruise and graze all over him. But like literally 30 minutes into this film, and you made a good point earlier, there isn't a huge amount of genuine action in the first half of this film.
Well, that's it. He doesn't
after
kill.
30 minutes, his shirt's fucked. He's covered in cuts. I'm like, I don't even know where he got that fucking stuff.
It was a train. He jumped out the back of a train blowing up. That's what. But he doesn't kill somebody until the hour mark or just after the hour.
Yeah.
John McClane doesn't actually kill somebody. That's the longest in a Die Hard film ever.
Is that the lift? Is the lift the first? So he kills the guys in the lift, and then he kills the guys in the truck. They accidentally kill the guy on the ship who gets cut in half, which was actually pretty funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, other than that, he doesn't actually kill all that many people in the film at all.
No. But he gets fucked up a lot. But like Zeus or Samuel L. Jackson probably was like, you know what, John McClane's taking a bit of a beating. Can I get a beating? Yeah, that's fine. You're going to get all his limps because we need him to still be an action hero. So you can get shot in the leg to limp. You can have your hands burnt after the...
That should have blown his fucking hands off. That should have totally blown his hands off.
Holes. Well, a paper clip sent the chair like 6 foot into the air. You telling me after he did that with the crowbar, didn't
his hands
just
getting
take
blown
his
off.
arms off? Yeah.
But that whole sequence again towards the end of the film when it starts falling to pieces, like why does Simon has spent the whole film being something of a Bond villain, but by this point he's like, all right, we've had enough of John McClane. We're trying to kill him at this point. Now you finally capture him on the ship. I don't want to go full Scott from Austin Powers, but let's get a gun, let's shoot him. End it now, bang, bang. Instead, they're like, no, we're going to have you both sit on the bomb that we're not going to watch. We're going to let that sink to the bottom of the ocean. Are you going to watch him? Well, of course not, because it's an explosion. Well, why didn't you just shoot him now just to make sure? No. It'll be more fitting if they're alive to see the explosion. It's completely needless. At that point, John McClane is dead to right. Just shoot him. Fucking shoot him.
That's the same with Officer Otto in the lift. Like he had in the elevator, he had the gun to McClane's chest, and then he's screaming in German. But he had no problem shooting Rick straight away. So why is he not shooting? Even though McClane's got the gun to his head, why doesn't he just shoot it?
I think that they're making the argument. It's like, you know, if you shoot, I'm going to shoot and all that jazz. So he has his moment. It's still a bit of a stretch. I mean, I love that sequence, so I don't explain about it too much. That I can kind of explain away. It's an action sequence. Nobody really knows what they're doing, blah, blah, blah. But when it's like, you've caught him. He's here. You want to kill him. He's on the floor. You've got guns, loads of guns. You literally have an Uzi in your hand. Pull the trigger, just shoot him. But no, you have to do the fucking Bond ultra elaborate death sequence. And it's like, well, you had it coming, didn't you? Which again, you know, you have to have because McClane has to survive. But it does lead to the weakest part of the film, which is the sequence on the border, which we've already mentioned in terms of it being the finale that you're seeing, but it's actually an alternative title because they filmed what was in the script and what they filmed was the sequence supposedly in Germany where they have the the McClane says sequence, and it was only afterwards like we don't like this, so they had to go back for reshoots at a huge cost to do the whole sequence at the border, and it's just not great. It's not great, sadly.
No, the ending again, as we said, needs to be the ship. But
100%.
this film holds up fantastically because it's a lot of practical effects. But what doesn't hold up, and if you would have made the ending the ship, that explosion at the end, that jump cut of them jumping off, because they kind of jumped, but then when it shows them again, they're halfway down, but then they're up again and then they're down. It really looked bad.
It does. And do you know what it reminded me of? Another film which looks fantastic for 99.9% of its runtime, The Untouchables, where the dude dies at the end and you're just like, dude, like the effects aren't there. It doesn't work. You just don't need to have the close-up. You could do the sequence without the close-up, and it's just unnecessary. It's the same with the bit. I actually think the other bit, which doesn't look good, is the bit with the water in the truck. It's not as bad as Die Another Day, where Bond surfs on that fucking bullshit wave, or certainly, what was the other wave one? Escape from LA. That is the worst example of it.
What you mean when he gives his friend the whole high five and they go their separate ways, left and right?
I rewatched that recently to see if it was as bad as I remembered. It was worse than I remembered. This isn't as egregious as that, but it's still bad. But other than those moments, this film looks it's beautifully shot, fantastic cinematography, brilliant New York film. As we mentioned, the big shame is that they move away from New York for the finale, which is unnecessary. One of the other things, we mentioned the fact that, a lot of this feels relatively timeless. One of the great 90s things in this film, which puts it in a certain time, but is also fantastic, is that no matter how dangerous the driving is, they never put on seatbelts. No. And that probably is like people are watching now, but like, why didn't they put on seatbelts? In the 90s, people didn't put on seatbelts. I remember the back of my dad's car, it didn't even have seatbelts because you didn't have to have them by law. So would people just drive around without their seatbelts on in the 90s? Abso-fucking-lutely. It happened all the time.
And there's no way, going to the driving section, I know we need to move on. We've been talking about this for a while now.
That's okay.
But there's no way he hasn't jumped on the pavement or the sidewalk, whatever you want to call it, and taken out about 1,500 pedestrians. Like, the fact that everyone just manages to get out of his way is ridiculous.
Well, that is going to... We'll deal with this when we get to the video game section of this podcast, because that game asked the same question, and they came to a very, very different conclusion. But we'll get to Die Hard Trilogy soon. Anything else you want to add before we get to favorite scene?
No, I'm good. We can go favorite scene.
Well, it's linked to literally what we're just talking about. For me, and it's what the scene I always think of when I think of this film, it's the driving through Central Park. I absolutely love that sequence. It's, you've got Zeus and McClane together. It's super iconic. It's shot on location. Looks fantastic. I could have mentioned, I don't want to say an explosion which kills people. I do love the opening sequence. I actually love the billboard sequence as well. And see, now I'm thinking, fuck, I love the subway sequence. Just in case, because we have criticized it, just to remind everyone, for an hour, this film is nearly perfect. For an hour, this film is so good. And the reason we've been so critical of the second half is largely because the first half is that good. The second half isn't terrible. It just can't keep the pace up. It just doesn't compare to the Simon Says element of this film. But I am going to fall back on the driving through Central Park.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites as well, and I probably would have picked it as well. But because there's so many good scenes in this, I'm going to change it up to the... Well, actually, I'm going to give you two, right? And one of them you're not going to have thought about. So it's Zeus and McClane meeting. That's definitely my favorite scene. Aside from the
billboard sequence.
The billboard scene, I think that's great.
Which is, let's be clear, from a white guy's perspective, that's like the ultimate nightmare. Sorry, the idea that you're like hungover and then somebody suddenly puts you in a truck, puts you in your underwear, puts a billboard on you and drops you off in fucking Harlem with a sign which says, I hate, like, oh my fucking days. Yeah. You think of like all the terrifying situations that action stars get put in. I can't think of many more fucking terrifying, more awkward. And one of my favorite parts, sorry, I'm ranting a bit here, is when he first gets out the truck and he's got the sign.
I was just about to mention it.
Oh, when he walks past the little old lady and you see the look on his face like, fuck. He's almost more upset about disappointing that old woman than he is getting stabbed by the gang.
No, that's not what I was going to mention. I was going to mention when he gets out and they said, we'll pick you up in 15. He goes, take your time. I'll be dead in 10.
Oh,
that's awesome. He knows he's in a situation that he's not coming out of.
I just love when the basketball bounces into the street and you see him in the background. What the fuck?
Yeah.
Like, nature boy here hates. Well, you know the rest of
Yeah.
that sentence. The whole sequence is
So
absolute gold.
that's yeah, favorite scene. Like I said, it all just brings up the tension, the meeting and everything is great. But the other one I really like is Joe and Connie randomly. Graham Greene and Colleen Camp. When they rescue the kids and they're gonna jump over, but it's too far. So he's kind of resorted himself to the fate that they're gonna blow up. So the way they just all just help that like hold the kids
It's
together and
quite
things,
nice. Yeah,
it's
yeah.
such a beautiful and heart wrenching moment.
And I mentioned earlier, and I actually, who would have thought I would go off on a tangent and not deal with that? But earlier I mentioned the fact that the support cast isn't as interesting in this film as say it is in the first movie, and that is those cast members are really good in this, but they're just not given enough screen time. It's almost as because they've got the whole city and it turns into this big sprawling plot. They should have really condensed the second half and made it a more personal story, and maybe got those characters more involved. Because the stuff with the school, that's the interesting stuff. The weird double crossing stuff with Simon, I just don't give a fuck about. So yeah, I would have. One of my big issues with this film, I would have spent more time with what is an interesting supporting cast, but ones who just don't get enough screen time, sadly.
When have you last seen Graham Greene and he's not been playing a Native American?
Fuck knows.
Exactly. Like
Fuck knows.
the one that I always go to is Maverick, where they've literally turned like they've given him the headdress and everything. And
Oh, of course, yeah,
yeah,
gets the full works. But yeah,
yeah.
like I said, at the start, he's really good in this. The inspector's really good in this. They just don't get enough to do, sadly. In terms of loves and hates, loves for me, Willis and Samuel Jackson have all the chemistry. That's number one for me with a bullet. Jeremy Irons is a genuinely good replacement for Hans Gruber, as good as anyone's going to get. And you have to remember, for the first 40 minutes of this film, he's just a voice on a microphone. And if you're going to get a voice for a mic, like, dude, Jeremy Irons has one of the all-time great voices. I'm not sure his accents are up to scratch. Like, his American accents are a bit all over the fucking map. And I don't know how good his German accent is. That doesn't sound quite as egregious to me. But his voice is absolutely superb.
I'll agree with you to a point. His voice is superb, and he has one of the all-time greatest villain voices.
Yes.
Like that guy is not telling me what to do on the radio from a good guy perspective.
No,
but
definitely not.
But he's definitely
he's
fantastic.
Great for this.
Yeah.
And I actually believe that he could be Hans Gruber's brother. I genuinely do.
Yeah.
They have a similar vibe.
I never think, though, he's the older brother. That always gets me when he says, I threw his little brother off the 32nd floor?
Yeah, but there's a reason for that, and I'll get to that in hates. Number 3 for loves, though, on location in New York. Mentioned it a bunch of times. This film looks absolutely gorgeous because it's shot in New York. It feels like a proper New York movie. Yeah. Oh, and I'll sneak in one more: the cold opening. I love that cold opening with the, like you already said, the music, the credits, and then the bomb. Fucking love that stuff. But those are my loves.
You probably didn't need to sneak it in because I was going to say the opening. I'll put the opening along with New York. I love the setting. I love that opening. Hot down summer in the city and everything like that is great. Bruce obviously is John McClane. It's one of his all-time.
Great in this, isn't he?
It's one of his all-time
really good
best characters. He's so good as John McClane. It's like wearing an old shoe at this point, and
but you have to remember
so well.
The performances aren't great. Like, we kind of veered off the whole like how to rank the Die Hard movies. So we always say it's 1, 3, 2, 4, 5. Now 5 is so bad, and he is so bad in 5. Like, it's a bad film, and he doesn't look like he's interested in 5.
He doesn't want to be there. You could see that from his interviews and stuff when he's going on about it. He just doesn't get the film, and it's the same with
bad. 4. I actually think 4. Like 4. Isn't a million miles like everyone when they think of 4, they think of the fighter jet sequence at the end, which kind of ruins things because it's when all of a sudden they're trying to posit John McClane as a superhero, and he was never supposed to be that. But 4 is like a decent action movie. It's just not a great Die Hard movie. That's his problem. If it wasn't a Die Hard film and you would just watch it as an action film, you'd be like, that's a good fucking action film.
Yeah,
it's just not a great Die Hard film.
But that's it, isn't it? That's because they started to turn him into something more. So, like a superhero can bring down a plane, do all this on his own. But the first 3 films, he's struggling. And we've always put that. He's struggling to do anything. So he's just that everyman who's fallen into the wrong situation a number of times.
Yeah.
But John McClane, Bruce Willis is John McClane. Like I said, it's like wearing an old shoe. It's absolutely perfect. He slips into that character so well. And the way he teams up with Samuel L. Jackson is fantastic. And I didn't actually say, you've said there a lot of times about the supporting cast. I like the supporting cast. I think the supporting cast do really well in this. Maybe I agree with you
No,
to a point where
I
you
like
don't get
it. They just
enough
don't get
of
enough.
them.
Hmm.
But I said Graham Greene and whatever his name is, Walter or Arthur,
Hmm.
Charlie, I love, Jerry, I love. I think the
Hmm.
supporting cast in this are great. So that'll be my third.
Yeah, no, I like him. I just don't think they get those kind of iconic moments because they lack screen time. But in terms of hates, the ending really isn't very good. I've got
Yeah.
not brilliant here. I'm going to go as far as say it's quite bad, sadly. Two, I'm still not sure about the jug riddle, even though you've explained it to me twice now. Two different ways of doing it, and I'm still not sure how it works. Number three, it does get a tad goofy towards the end, especially the tunnel and the boat jump stuff. It starts inching towards being slightly ludicrous. And again, like we were mentioned then, moving away from what we think of when we think of Die Hard. Like he did some amazing stuff in the first one. Like he jumps off the top of the building, but in those sequences, you can feel his terror. He's like, what the fuck am I doing? I shouldn't be doing this. It gets a bit action movie-ish towards the end of this film, and I don't think it really works. And number four, the reason that Simon doesn't feel like the older brother, it's the hair and the clothing is so 1995. He's dressing like he's got those ridiculous sunglasses, his big collar on the shirt earlier. When he takes off his jacket, he's got a sleeveless top. It's so aggressively 1995, and I'm just not like I love Simon when he's a voice. When you see him, I'm like, man, that is a look he is going for. And I think that's the reason he looks younger, because he's wearing ill-fitted clothes, to say the least.
Well, that made me laugh because Jeremy Irons said he's claimed that someone once described his hairstyle in the film as midlife crisis.
Oh,
So
100%.
yeah,
100%. Whereas Hans Gruber constantly looks, even though it's an 80s film, he looks totally put together. He's got the fucking hair slicked.
yeah.
He's got like the $1 million suit. He looks the business. Whereas, yeah, Simon, exactly that point. Looks like somebody going through a midlife crisis, sadly. So those are my hates.
Cool. Mine, the ship exploding. I think it looked awful. It just didn't look right at all. The baseball field, the ending of the baseball field was you have this elaborate plan, and then that's your end, just to shoot him with a sniper rifle just seemed pointless.
Yeah.
And the way Simon eats a boiled egg, didn't like it.
Yeah, I get it. Did he need to be eating that boiled egg? I don't think he needed to be. It was completely unnecessary. It was as unnecessary as his inability to shoot John McClane when he had the opportunity.
It was so egregious. You didn't need to put that boiled egg in your mouth, shoot him with the gun, and then just keep eating it. It was, I just didn't like it at all.
I didn't even think about that. Why the fuck did he have that boiled? It was weird. Weird. Any alternative titles for this one?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. So Argentina, Die Hard 3, Revenge.
Kind of works, but that sounds like it's Simon's movie rather than John McClane's movie.
Canada, Walk or Die, Final Revenge.
That sounds like a parody.
Yeah. Croatia, The Death of a Man 3.
What the fuck?
Yeah.
Not having that.
Denmark, watch the porno version. Die Hard, Mega Hard.
No fucking way is it called Die Hard Mega Hard.
Die Hard, Mega Hard.
Fuck me. I hope that's true.
France, A Day in Hell.
No.
Germany, Die Hard, Now More Than Ever.
I mean, right, I know we're laughing at that, but they got more and more ridiculous. Die Harder sounds a bit like a porno. Yeah. And what was the last one? Die Hard, A Good Day to Die Hard?
A Good Day to Die Hard, yeah.
That's super dumb. Oh, God, I fucking hate the fifth movie. I hate the fifth movie.
But Die Hard, Now More Than Ever.
Right, is Die Hard is Die Hard 5 one of the worst sequels of all time in terms of
You cannot get off Die Hard, can you? Die Hard 5. Look, it's awful. We never watched it. Move on.
Okay, but that is the thing. I think it's so bad that is in that rarefied air of being one of the worst sequels of all time. But anyway, carry
on. I'm with you. It's terrible.
Yeah.
Where was I?
Denmark.
Germany. Germany. I said it 3 times, but I don't think you actually picked up on it because you were just
ranting about how much I hate Die Hard 5.
Germany, Die Hard, Now More Than Ever.
Terrible.
Greece, Too Hard to Die, Revenge.
that almost sounds like Too Fast, Too Furious situation.
Yeah. Hungary, Die Hard, Life is Always Precious.
Oh, get fucked. That's terrible.
Yes. Iran, John Hard 3.
John Hard 3.
John Hard 3.
Jesus Christ, a lot of these sound like pornos.
Yeah. Lithuania, Tough Cookie, Revenge with a Bang.
I mean, that's my favorite one so far. It's
Yeah.
terrible, but it's my favorite one.
Norway, Die Hard, I New York.
I New York, not I
I New
Heart New
York.
York, just I
No,
New York.
I New
All right,
York,
fair
yeah.
enough. Yeah, sure.
Well, what was it? Romania, Hard to Kill 3.
That sounds like a Stephen King, Steven
Yeah,
Seagal movie.
it's a sequel to Steven Seagal film that never had Hard to Kill 2.
Yeah. Was there a movie called Hard to Kill?
Yeah,
Yeah,
was
Steven
in Hard
Seagal.
to
Yeah,
Kill. Yeah, it was the one with Kelly LeBrock.
Ah, of course, of course.
Ah, coming strong again. Good old Slovenia. Die
Slovenia.
upright without hesitation.
I mean, that is a title. That is a title. I give him that.
Sweden, Die Hard, uninhibited.
Yeah.
Turkey, Die Hard 3, Intelligence takes its revenge.
Oh, that is bad.
Ukraine, Die Hard 3, Die with a Song.
These are some of the worst we've ever had.
Yeah. And finally, Vietnam, Facing Challenge 3.
Right, these are all terrible, right? But should we be surprised because the titles of Die Hard films in and of themselves are terrible? Die Hard,
Yeah.
Die Hard, Die Hard, Die Harder, Die Hard with a Vengeance. Like if you stop and think about it, it's actually a terrible title. And then you suddenly have Die Hard 4.0. You're like, what the fuck? That feels like you're coming from a different world. And then Die Hard, A Good Tate's Die Hard. They're all terrible titles, except for even the first one. We've become accustomed to it, but Die Hard is actually a terrible title for the first film. If you think about
absolutely.
it makes no sense.
And it's one of the
if you didn't know the title and you watched that film and you went, fucking that film was one of the best action films I've ever seen. What's it called? Die Hard. What the fuck? You lazy sons of... You called that movie Die Hard?
But that's not lazy, is it? It's not like the
super lazy.
It's stupid. It's not lazy.
Oh, dude, that sounds like if somebody was, again, like so many of our questions, when it comes to the 80s, what was the answer? Cocaine.
Yeah.
Cocaine is the answer. There was guys in the boardroom. They're like, what do we call this film? That's me snorting a massive fucking line of coke and going, Die Hard, and everyone going, yep, let's go play a round of golf.
Do you know what they struggled with, though? Because I'm assuming they struggled with, no matter how much cocaine they had. How can we fit Die Hard into the film? You know what they like to do? They like to put the name.
Put the actual title. Yeah.
They wouldn't do that with Die Hard, would they?
Yeah, because it wouldn't work. Like, don't get me wrong, and I love those. I love it when they get the title. Like, I love it, they get Con Air into the title and all these other things. But it's like, Jesus Christ. Die Hard, terrible title. Anyway, any facts for Die Hard with a Vengeance?
We got a couple. So Bruce Willis suggested Samuel L. Jackson for the movie. Jackson was thrilled. He says he's seen the first Die Hard maybe 30 times. So from 1988 to 1995, he watched it 30 times. I mean, that's good going.
I think it's hyperbole. He gets a bit carried away sometimes, doesn't he?
Jonathan Hensley was detained by the FBI after completing the script for the film because he knew extensive information about the Federal Gold Reserve in downtown Manhattan. Hensley stated that he got all the information from an article written in the New York Times.
Wasn't there another film we did not too long ago where it was The Hunt for Red October, where they were like, wait a minute, how the fuck does this guy know everything about submarines, about military submarines? But yeah, you get this every so often.
Samuel L. Jackson has gone ahead and said that Zeus is the closest character to his personality of any person he's played.
A racist. Awesome.
When Zeus Carver picks up the gold bar at the Federal Reserve, he says, damn, this is heavy. A stand of the gold bar kept at the Federal Reserve weighs approximately 25 pounds.
That's pretty heavy.
You would actually need 480 dump trucks to steal all the gold from the Federal Reserve, not the 14 they stole.
Yeah. I mean, still, it's a lot of gold.
During a press conference to promote the film's release, Bruce Willis preemptively told reporters that he would not discuss the April 1995 Oklahoma City bombing in any way because he did not want to trivialize the real-world tragedy by comparing it to in any way to a fictional movie.
Yeah, that was one of the reasons they thought maybe this movie get pushed. And another reason why this movie is never getting made. There are many reasons this movie would never get made now, but like, there's no way you're getting a film with like a bunch of bombs going off in New York. There's just no fucking way. In a post 9/11 world, forget about it. This film isn't happening.
The water bottle riddle came from a problem on an exam Jonathan Hensley couldn't figure out. So you're not the only one.
Fuck for that. It wasn't just me.
Trucks aren't allowed on the FDR, as stated in the movie by Detective Connie Kowalski, but the city made a special exception for the filmmakers.
Well, you got to get them into the sea.
Yeah. The filmmakers really did pull the pickup truck off the bridge with the boat. I've already said that one. Samuel L. Jackson had sandbags tied to his feet so he would sink in the underwater shots.
Jesus
They drowned him. The poor
it's pretty
bastard.
pretty hardcore, yeah. That bit actually looks pretty cool because you mentioned the fact that the explosion looks ass. When the water with the music, and Michael Kamen does the music for this film. We've not mentioned it. For the most part, you're like, oh, well, this is a relatively standard Die Hard score until Simon and his cronies show up. And let's be clear, at the Federal Reserve Bank, how many villains do you need with you before somebody gets suspicious? They couldn't look any more villainous. Like everybody he brought with him looks like a villain. But he went for like a really unique score. Like that whole militaristic thing they go for like the second half of the film is really unique. But anyway, sorry.
That's right. The sex scene between Jeremy Irons and Sam Phillips was added in at the last minute because John McTiernan knew that the film would get an R rating from the MPAA. So he said, "What? Might as well put a sex scene in it."
I mean, it's not very sexy, is it? They kind of rip each other's clothes off, and that's about it.
When McClane is dropped off in Harlem, he expected to be dead in 4 minutes. When the gang members across the street from Zeus' shop discover McClane wearing the sandwich board, 4 minutes have elapsed in real time.
Nice.
Yep. There was one. Oh, there you go. John McTiernan liked this 1961 Mack truck so much that he bought the truck after the movie finished.
That's the great thing you can do if you're like that rich and you're doing that well. It's just like, oh, I'm just going to buy a truck. Sure. It's not even just a matter of buying a truck. Where are you going to keep the truck? In my big ass house. That's what I'm going to do.
And McClane's watch is on the inside of his wrist because that's how Bruce Willis actually wears his watch. I used to get stick for doing that in school. I used to wear my watch on the inside.
I remember it being a thing for a while. Never really got into it personally. Hug to the Future. So this is where we ask a question. Remake, sequel, Let's Die or Leave Well Alone. Very easy for me. Just let it die. In the nicest possible way. I do not want a young McClane movie. Like, this should have stopped at 4. I don't want any more Die Hard films.
For me, yes. As much as I love Die Hard and I love John McClane, just leave it alone. It should have stayed at 3. We should have just been left with us. We've always said when you do remakes or when you do sequels or anything, it doesn't take your enjoyment away from the third, from your originals.
No, 5. As much as I hate 5, it doesn't impact my love of the first one.
Although anytime you watch any of the John McClane ones, you can't shut up about 5, as we've noticed.
Well, we're talking about it. It brings it up in a way. Like it is upsetting that movie, but it doesn't impact the first one. But
you will be sat there on your own watching Die Hard and just talk to the cats and go, "Fucking Die Hard 5."
Die Hard 5 is really bad though.
Yeah,
but yeah, I don't want to see any more. I mean, like you said, I'll even allow Die Hard 4.0 because I think even though it's not a great Die Hard film, it's a perfectly decent action film. Fair enough. They should have stopped there. They arguably should have stopped at 3. Definitely stop now. If you're going to make it, just make it a different name. We don't need another Die Hard film.
I'm good with it just being a trilogy. But if we're just talking about this film standalone, yeah, just leave it alone. It's perfect. Aside from the explosion at the end, which looked ropey, the rest of it looks perfect. You can't really do any better with it.
Yeah, but I don't want a remake of this film. Like that's what I mean. Like this film has problems, but just leave it be.
That's what I mean. Just leave it be.
In terms of making a change, to ask a question, if you could only make one change to make this movie better, it's just a better last act. We mentioned the fact that there was the alternative ending, which was more interesting on paper, but didn't really work. Then they brought in the big budget version that didn't really work. We've mentioned it a bunch of times. It should have never got out of New York. The film should have ended on the boat. It didn't. That would be my major change for this film.
Mine too. My change is just make the boat the final scene, the final ending.
And do you know what it also does? It also solves one of my other issues with this film. If you do that, it probably makes this film 15 minutes shorter, which it needs to be. It's 2 hours, 10 minutes. And towards the end, I personally started feeling it. I'm like, this film did not need to be 2 hours and 10 minutes long.
Have a bigger fight with Simon whilst the chemicals are mixing. You manage to 100%. Pin Simon against the bomb and you just make it off as it explodes.
Exactly. He blows up on the ship. You escape. Movie ends with them on the side and he calls Holly. Fucking end a movie. You don't need anything more. Then you have a movie which is like an hour and 50, hour and 55. Everything's in New York. Problem solved. So yeah, Well, at least we're on the same page there. In terms of video games, we mentioned it earlier, Die Hard Trilogy by Probe Entertainment, which was massive when I was younger. It was released for the PlayStation and Sega Saturn. Remember Alien Trilogy as well? That seemed to be a thing they were doing back then. I loved that game as well. But that was basically Die Hard Trilogy had 3 games in one, and each like mini game was linked to one of the movies. But the one everybody loved was Die Hard with a Vengeance, because you got to drive around New York in a cab. And in that movie, so to your point, when you said, oh, well, surely he would hit some of the pedestrians, that game was mostly hitting pedestrians.
Yeah.
It was so fucking violent, where your windscreen just be covered in blood all the time. It was such a bizarre take on the movie, but everyone loved it back in the day. There was actually a Die Hard Trilogy 2, Viva Las Vegas, released in 2000 for the PlayStation by N-Space. I don't think anyone remembers that. I remember there was Die Hard Vendetta for the PS2 and GameCube. The one that most people won't have heard of, but was awesome, was Die Hard Arcade, which was released, unsurprisingly, in the arcade, but also for the Sega Saturn. Now, that was released in Japan as Dynamite Deku, or Dynamite Cop as it's known over here. And basically, it's just a side-scrolling arcade beat-em-up, but a really good one. And they just reskinned it as the Die Hard game over here on the Sega Saturn. And it was fucking dope. There was actually a sequel to it for the Dreamcast but they ended up having to call that Dynamite Cop because they'd lost the licensing by that point. But if you can get your hands on it, Die Hard Arcade is actually fucking dope, because it's a Sega arcade game from 95, 96 at like the peak of their powers. Yeah, hardly anyone played that, sadly. In terms of if I was going to make a Die Hard game now, or something Die Hard with Revenge, I suppose, I would just love a kind of remake of the Die Hard trilogy. That would be the ideal for me. Or even, as the aforementioned Die Hard Arcade, a high-res version of that. I'd fucking love that, but we're not going to get either of them, sadly.
Same with me, really. I love playing the Die Hard trilogy when I was a kid, 1996, I think it was, on the PlayStation 1. Absolutely loved it. So if I wanted to see, I'd rather see an upmarket version, like a remade version of that game.
Yeah, just with a bit more effort made, I suppose. But I don't even know who the developer would be. It'd just be cool to get a high-res version of it, even just for the nostalgia, I suppose. Ratings and recommendations for this film, I suspect we're going to be on the same page here, because Die Hard is the ultimate 5-star, yes, recommend, without question. It's straight. This, I think, is almost the ultimate 4-star movie in many respects. It's not. Is it as good as the first one? No, not at all. It has problems in the second half. But like I said, for an hour, this film, I would say for an hour, this film is inching towards 5-star. But the problem is the second half is at best 3-star. So I'm more than happy to settle on 4 stars. But I would still totally recommend it, because it still looks great. It's still a totally fun film. It's a bit too long. The ending's a bit shit, but yeah, still largely brilliant.
Yeah, it's a 4-star for me as well, because I'm pretty sure I gave the 5th one. If I didn't, I need to go back and slap myself. But I'm pretty sure I give the first one
I think we both
5-star.
5 stars.
Yeah, but this is a 4-star film because it's just got those little bit problems that knock it down. It's not as good as the first one, as we said, but it's highly enjoyable. I would go back and watch it again, and I would recommend it for people to watch. It's great. And like we've already said, the buddy cop vibes between Zeus and John McClane are what sells this film this day and age. It's so good.
Yeah. It's this top tier, and it's the Simons. It's the bit everyone remembers. Everyone remembers Zeus and McClane running around the city doing the whole Simon Says thing. That isn't probably as much of the film as you remember, but like I said, for an hour, this film is fucking amazing. It's a shame that the second half, the wheels start to fall off a little bit, and the last act in particular is a bit of a stinker. But when you've got that, the first hour is as good as this, it's still easy to recommend as far as I'm concerned. All right, so that's been Die Hard with a Vengeance. Sir, next week is your choice. What are we going for?
Next week is my choice, and I'm going to give you the year. We're going back to the 80s. It's 1988.
88. All right, you got to give me more than that.
Yep. The director, Chuck Russell.
I don't even know who Chuck Russell is, so no.
Chuck Russell directed The Mask, if that helps.
The Mask?
Yeah. Jim Carrey's The Mask.
Yeah. So it wouldn't be special effects based or something? I don't know. Got to give me more than that.
Oh, Chuck Russell also gave us Eraser, A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warrior, and The Scorpion King.
Well, what a mixed bag. Nightmare on Elm Street 3 is fucking dope. It is easily the second best Nightmare on Elm Street movie after the first one. But I still don't know the answer to this. I'm failing miserably.
No, that's fine. I'll give you the tagline. To be fair, if I give you the actor, you might not get it. Man is no longer the supreme being on this planet.
It's not that Rutger Hauer film, is it?
No.
What's the Ruka Hauer one I'm thinking of? Because I've seen it. It's come up on my feed a bunch of times recently where he's fighting an alien from like the future or something.
Split Second.
Split Second. Thank you.
Yeah. I like Split Second.
Yeah, of course you like Split Second.
With Kim Cattrall.
I've never actually seen it, but for some reason it just keeps coming up on my phone. Split Second all the time. The dodgy posters, Ruka Hauer wearing all the black and stuff, the terrible tagline, all the time. But we'll get around to it, I'm sure.
So the star of the film, Kevin Dillon.
Jesus Christ, what is this deep cut? I still no idea. None. I can see it for the rest of my life. I don't think I get it.
Shawnee Smith as well. She stars in it.
Fucking hell. Should I know that? I'll know this film, I assume.
I would hope so. Well, I mean, I've talked about this film a lot. I've been wanting to do this for a while. So, 1988's remake of The Blob.
Oh shit! Yeah, I've never actually seen this, but it's one of those movies I remember seeing the cover of all the time when I was younger at the VHS. Like when I went to rent videos, The Blob was just always there. But for some odd reason, it was just one of those random ones we just never picked up. So I'm actually looking forward to this.
I think it's the name, really. The name kind of like The Blob just doesn't sound.
It's based on a 50s film, isn't it?
Yeah, Steve McQueen.
McQueen. Is it 50s or 60s? But I know it's a Steve McQueen one, the original.
60s, I want to say. I'm not too sure.
60s. Well, it could be either, I suppose. But that's a great show. I'm looking forward to that. That'd be good.
I've been looking forward to doing this for a while. So,
an out-of-season horror film.
Yeah, well, we don't. There's quite a few we need to do. Then we can't always fit them into October.
No, there's quite a few actually I want to do. So
1958 was the Steve McQueen one.
Oh, so it was on the cusp, in fairness. But I've never seen the original. I've never seen this one. So that's an absolutely great show. Deep cut, but I think that'll be loads of fun. But so next week is going to be The Blob of all movies. Anything else to add before we wrap this up?
No, we're all good this week, mate. We're all good indeed.
I've been Liam. He's been Rob, and you have been listening to the Hey Guys podcast. Cheers, guys. Bye-bye.
Cheers, guys. Bye now.
Oh, and before I forget, where can folk reach us if they were so inclined to?
Well, you can actually reach us on Hey You Guys 80s at Facebook, Instagram, and on Twitter. But if you want to send us a mail, do heyyouguys80s@gmail.com. Send us in your recommendations. Send us in your thoughts about any of the episodes. Just literally talk to us. We'll have a one-sided talk with you on the podcast.
Yeah. We're nice folk. Get in touch. But no, cheers, guys. Bye-bye.
Cheers, guys. Bye now.
Hey, you guys!